The island of Lesbos in the Aegean Sea, 23 centuries ago. A man in his early 40s stands knee-deep in a shallow lagoon. His robes are hitched up and soaked. In one hand he holds a small knife. In the other, a sea creature most people would refuse to touch. Fishermen watch from the shore. They know this man is rich, educated, famous even, and every morning he wades into their lagoon and cuts open fish, snails, squid, not to eat them, not to offer them to the gods, just to look inside. He peels back the skin of a dogfish and freezes. Inside is something impossible, a cord connecting the unborn pup to its mother, the way a human baby is connected in the womb. Fish are not supposed to have this. He writes it down. He is always writing things down. And that small, strange habit, noticing something and writing it down, is about to change the world more than any army ever has. Here is the question you didn't know you had. Humans had been around for 200,000 years. We had built pyramids, mapped stars, written poetry. So why did it take until this man, this one man standing in a lagoon, for anyone to systematically look at the world and check their answers? His name was Aristotle, and the story of how he invented scientific thinking is stranger than you'd expect, because it ends with a twist. The man who taught the world to ask questions would become the reason humanity stopped asking them. For 2,000 years. To understand what Aristotle did, you have to understand the world he was born into. A world where every question already had an answer. The answer was the gods. Why does thunder roar? Zeus is angry. Why do crops fail? Demeter mourns. Why does disease sweep through a city? Someone, somewhere, offended heaven. These weren't stories to the ancient world. They were explanations, complete ones. A few Greek thinkers had begun to push back. Thales guessed that everything was made of water. Democritus imagined tiny particles called atoms, bold ideas, brilliant ones even. But they were guesses. Nobody checked. Checking wasn't a thing you did. Aristotle was born in 384 BC in Stagira, a small city in the north of Greece, near Macedonia. And one detail of his childhood matters more than all the rest. His father was a doctor. Not just any doctor, physician to the king of Macedon. Young Aristotle grew up around dissection, around herbs and wounds and bodies, around the idea that if you wanted to understand something, you opened it up and looked. Remember that. It's the seed of everything. Both his parents died when he was young. At 17, his guardian sent him south, to the one place in the world where a brilliant orphan belonged, Athens, and the Academy of Plato. The Academy was the greatest school on earth, and its teaching at its heart was this: don't trust your eyes. The physical world is a shadow, a flawed, flickering copy of a perfect world of ideas. Truth lives up there in pure reason, not down here in the mud and the fish guts. Aristotle stayed for 20 years. He became Plato's most brilliant student, the one Plato called the mind of the school. And slowly, quietly, he began to disagree with everything the school stood for. Because Aristotle, the doctor's son, couldn't accept that the world in front of him was beneath his attention. Why would a bird's wing be a lie? Why would the pattern on a snail's shell be a shadow? To him, the world wasn't hiding the truth. The world was the truth, if you looked carefully enough. In 347 BC, Plato died. The academy needed a new head. Everyone knew who the best mind in the school was. They chose someone else, Plato's nephew. Aristotle passed over, packed his scrolls, and left Athens. It looked like the end of a career. It was actually the beginning of science, because a man with no school, no master and no one to answer to, is free to try something no one has ever tried. Aristotle drifted east across the Aegean and eventually landed on the island of Lesbos, which brings us back to that lagoon. With his student Theophrastus, a native of the island, Aristotle spent roughly 2 years doing something no human being had ever done: a systematic survey of living things. Not a poem about nature, not a myth, an investigation. He dissected everything the fishermen brought him: squid, cuttlefish, crabs, eels, rays. He watched chicken embryos develop day by day, cracking one egg each morning to see what had changed. Arguably the first controlled biological study in history. He described over 500 species. He worked out that dolphins breathe air and nurse their young. So, whatever they look like, they are not fish. He wouldn't get full credit for that insight for 2,000 years. And he noticed something bizarre about the octopus: that the male uses one specialized arm to deliver its seed to the female. Naturalists laughed at this for centuries. It was finally confirmed in the 1800s. Aristotle had simply looked. Or take the catfish. Aristotle reported that in Greek rivers, the father guards the eggs, hovering over the nest for weeks, snapping at anything that comes near. Absurd, said later naturalists. Fish don't parent. In the 1850s, the great zoologist Louis Agassiz confirmed it, and the species now carries the name Silurus aristotelis. Aristotle's catfish. Stop and feel how strange this is. The most educated man alive, hands deep in fish guts, taking dictation from nature. His old teacher would have called it a waste of a divine mind. Aristotle called it the only honest way to know anything. He wrote, "In all things of nature there is something of the marvelous, even in the lowliest creatures, especially in the lowliest creatures." But observation was only half of what he built. The other half was a machine made of words, for testing whether your thinking itself was broken. He called it logic. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. It sounds like a child's puzzle. It was actually the first tool in history for catching an error, before it becomes a belief. No priest required, no oracle. Anyone could use it. Anyone could check anyone. And he insisted that why itself comes in flavors. Why does a statue exist? Because of the bronze it's made from, because of the sculptor who shaped it, because of the design in the sculptor's mind, because of the purpose it was made for. 4 different answers, all true, none complete alone. It sounds abstract until you realize he was teaching people that a question isn't finished just because an answer arrived. In 343 BC, a letter arrived from the most dangerous man in Greece. King Philip of Macedon wanted a tutor for his 13-year-old son. The boy's name was Alexander. For 3 years, the man who would conquer the known world sat in a classroom with the man who was learning how to explain it. We'd love to know what passed between them. Almost none of it survives. But when Alexander marched east, he ordered specimens, plants, animals, sent back to his old teacher. In 335 BC, Aristotle returned to Athens. He didn't rejoin the academy. He founded his own school in a grove dedicated to Apollo Lysias, the Lyceum. And it wasn't really a school. It was the first research institute in human history. They collected constitutions of 158 Greek cities to compare how governments actually worked. They assembled one of the first great libraries. They organized knowledge itself. Biology here, physics there, ethics, politics, poetry, memory, sleep, dreams. The filing system of the modern university was born under those olive trees. His method ran on 3 steps, and you will recognize them. Observe carefully, organize what you find, then ask why, and make the explanation face the evidence. It's not yet the full scientific method. There's no experiment, no mathematics of proof. But it is the trunk of the tree every laboratory on Earth grew from. In 323 BC, far away in Babylon, Alexander the Great died. And in Athens, everything Macedonian became a target overnight, including the old philosopher who had once tutored the tyrant. The charge they drafted against Aristotle was impiety, disrespect toward the gods, the exact charge that had been used 76 years earlier to execute Socrates. Aristotle left Athens that night. He is said to have remarked that he would not give Athens the chance to sin against philosophy twice. He withdrew to his mother's estate on the island of Euboea, and within a year he was dead. He was 62. And here the story should end. It doesn't, because the strangest part of Aristotle's story is what happened after he died. His writings survived, barely, and by luck. That's a story of sellers and smugglers we'll save for another day. What matters is where they ended up, everywhere. In the Islamic Golden Age, scholars in Baghdad translated him, studied him, argued with him. Ibn Rushd wrote so much about him he was known simply as the commentator, because Aristotle needed no name. He was just the philosopher. In medieval Europe, Thomas Aquinas fused Aristotle's system with Christian teaching. Universities built entire curricula on his books. His words settled arguments. And that is exactly where the trouble began. Because Aristotle had been wrong about things. Of course he was. He was one man working with his eyes and a knife at the very beginning. He taught that heavy objects fall faster than light ones, that the heart does our thinking, while the brain merely cools the blood, that flies simply spring to life out of rotting meat. Mistakes are normal. Mistakes are how the method is supposed to work. Someone looks again and corrects you. But nobody looked again. For nearly 2,000 years, Aristotle said so ended the conversation. The man had become scripture. Think about what that means. The inventor of "go and check" became the reason no one went and checked. His answers were so good, so complete, so beautifully organized that humanity mistook them for the finish line. The spell ran so deep that when Galileo built his telescope and offered professors a look at the moons of Jupiter, moons Aristotle's heavens had no room for, it said that some of them simply refused to put their eye to the glass. Why, look, the books already contained the truth. Until, one by one, people started doing the unthinkable, not rejecting Aristotle, but imitating him. Vesalius cut open real human bodies and found the old anatomy texts were wrong. Galileo tested falling weights and watched 2,000 years of certainty hit the ground at exactly the same time. Here's the twist hiding inside the scientific revolution. It wasn't a war against Aristotle. It was Aristotle's own method, finally aimed at Aristotle's own answers. The students did what the teacher had done, not what the teacher had said. Science was never really a body of answers. Aristotle's answers mostly died. Science is a posture, wading into the lagoon, picking the thing up, looking for yourself, and writing down what's actually there. That posture has one inventor, and we know his name. Every laboratory, every telescope, every vaccine, every phone in every pocket sits at the end of a chain of people who checked. Follow that chain back far enough, link by link, and it ends on a beach on Lesbos, with a man holding a dogfish, noticing something impossible, and reaching for his pen. As for his books, the ones that carried all of this to us, they survived the death of their author by inches. Hidden in a cellar, buried in a pit in the ground, sold, smuggled, and very nearly lost forever. But that is another story.